Welcome, everyone, to the captive audience. It is the 11th of May, 2026. I'm Kevin Hoare, your host tonight. Sorry we had a bit of a delay in starting the show. You know, sometimes work just gets in the way, but that's okay because we still try to bring this to you despite the busy schedules that everybody has, yours, mine, and of course, the people who are busy trying to wreak havoc on our state. And one of them is finally getting our comeuppance, at least in terms of political polling. There's a lot of time left between now and the November general election. However, there's a new poll that indicates that a majority of voters in Oregon's most Democrat friendly region are dissatisfied with Governor Tina Kotek. As she approaches the end of her first term and she seeks another 4 years in office, apparently she's in some hot water with the voters. Just a third of Portland metro area residents say they have a positive opinion of Kotek, while 59% said they have a negative impression of her. So nearly 6 in 10 voters in the Portland metro area have a negative impression of Tina Kotek. And this was the Oregonian, OregonLive.com, that did this survey. It's 600 registered voters in Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington, conducted by DHM Research in the last week of April. And so, despite all of the things Tina Kotek has been saying and doing to shift the focus away and do battle with the Trump administration, apparently it's not working too well because everybody knows that not only is she responsible for what's happening here, but they're reminded once again with the Measure 120 gas tax, which is a no vote will reject Tina Kotek's gas tax increase, that clearly the voters demonstrated in their testimony strong opposition to. This was followed up by 250,000 people signing the petition in record time to push back and put that on the ballot. Tina Kotek then screwed them over and all of us by trying to move it and successfully moving it from November to May because she was afraid of the consequences it would have for her. But the consequences seem to be happening anyway. It is a poll whose results now are landing just before the May 19th primary. She does not face a challenger in the Democratic field of any noteworthy importance. Meanwhile, Republicans are having a strong competitive primary for the gubernatorial candidate. And as you know, there are probably 4 major candidates at this point that have been in the debates. That's Christine Drazen, state senator, who was the 2022 nominee, Chris Dudley, former Trailblazer basketball player and 2010 Republican nominee. Both of them came fairly close in their races. Ed Deal, state representative, who led the gas tax referral effort successfully, and has a lot of very strong conservative views, while obviously one of these people that's emerged as a political player in the state legislature. And then lastly, Danielle Bethel, who's a county commissioner from Marion County. And those are the 4 that have name ID and money. There's a 5th, David Medina, who has not participated in the debates, I guess, due to the lack of fundraising results. But he is somebody who's mentioned still when talking about candidates running for the Republican nomination. So, but Tina Kotek is probably one of the main reasons why that race is so competitive on the Republican side. People sense that there's an opportunity. And of course, she represented Northeast Portland in the Oregon House for 15 years. 9 of those 15 years, she was the House Speaker, which is the most powerful position in the state legislature, and quite possibly in state government at times, since the governor doesn't really control what passes into law other than blocking it through a veto, which is rare given all the control the Democrats have. But she is responsible for many of the things that now plague our state that happened on her watch and under her leadership. So prior to the 2022 gubernatorial election, the same poll found 55% of Portland voters specifically had a negative impression of Tina Kotek, and only 37% had a positive impression. So she did win in 2022 very narrowly. I think it was like 2% over Drazen. But back then it was only 55%. Now it's 69%, or sorry, 59%. So we'll see where it's at close to the election time in November. But getting out there and voting in the Republican primary, if you're a registered Republican, you can go and do that here all the way up until 8 p.m. on election day. And then is one of the things you can do. And then after that, getting behind and supporting the alternative to Tina Kotek that the Republicans nominate. And, you know, there's a lot of people that are talking about the headwinds nationally because it tends to not be as successful a year when the president, the party of the president, tends to experience some disadvantages in midterms in terms of turnout and in terms of winning historically. However, these numbers seem to be pointed in a different direction for Oregon. In order for Republicans to win statewide, said the pollster, they're going to have to chip away at big margins in the metro region. He's not making a prediction, but suggests that there is some possibility of that given these polling results. Kotek's campaign manager, Marisha Sangren, said the poll tells us nothing about November because it didn't ask voters' impressions of Republican candidates for governor. So apparently, they don't want to draw any conclusions from the the Democrat running the state as an incumbent, and they don't think any poll is relevant unless they can start talking about the Republican that's running against her. But this is clearly relevant. And then, of course, they spend time talking about Republicans pledging their loyalty to Trump and claiming they'll have a clear choice because Tina Kotek will be a governor who stands up for them, and claims that Republicans would just hand the keys to Oregon to Trump. I don't think Trump wants the keys to Oregon. Clearly not. But I don't think Tina Kotek is a governor who stands up for them. She steps all over them, is what she does, and we've seen that time and again. It's a habit that she has. Anyway, so all three metro area counties have seen this decline. Multnomah County, where registered Democrats outnumber Republicans 5-1, 56% of respondents said they have a negative impression of the governor. And only 35% said that they had a positive impression. And this is a big change from the last poll that they did in March of 2025, the Oregonian did. In March of 2025, 35% said they had a negative impression, 50% said they had a positive impression. So these numbers are almost totally reversed in a year. That is quite something. That tells you that something is happening. They're blaming rightly the person in office controlling the state and who is fundamentally part of the process of passing these policies into law, and now seems to be completely failing to do any of the solutions she said that she was going to do during her last run for governor. She said that these crises are ones that she was going to reverse, such as homelessness, building housing, tying state spending on school to academic outcomes. A lot of things that she said, but they admit here, this is the Oregonian admitting that these policies so far have yielded limited progress. That's kind, by the way. There's no way they'd say that about a Republican. They would just say it failed. it's a failure. If promising to build 33,000 new homes a year and only building 11,000 is what you do, that's a low F. So you can grade that pretty effectively, and you don't need to grade her on a curve either. Um, she's one of the least popular governors in the United States on top of it with their own people. So the places that seem to be affected the most are some of the places she considers in the bag and a stronghold for her. So uh, people seem to be baffled with how much Tina Kotek is struggling to produce the results that she promised. But then again, the results that we've gotten are a result of the policies she put into place over the years. Then she promises better results, but sticks with the policies she's always had. And lo and behold, you still get the same or worse results. Now, it's funny, this one of the people that was mentioned here sort of anecdotally in this polling process is a Democrat, and she says she's particularly concerned about Oregon's poor education outcomes and high homelessness rates. At the same time, she said, is it going to stop me from voting for Democrats? Absolutely not. Well, that's the definition of insanity, Ms. Highsmith. That is what you're getting. You're getting what you voted for. If you don't vote differently, you're not sending a message to the people who are producing the poor education outcomes and the high homelessness rates. And they've had 4 years to do something about it. Now, broader voter dissatisfaction with the national political landscape can be a factor in Tina Kotek's low approval. And they start to mention that, Oregon's governor has limited or no control over the national political landscape. But actually, she's done everything she can to be a part of it, to be a player in it, and to do a lot of chest thumping about how she was standing up to an administration that actually is probably at this point doing more to alleviate these problems that Tina Kotek said she was going to solve than Tina Kotek is doing. So we'll see, because this is the dichotomy. If people say, I have to vote for a Democrat, but I'm really unhappy with what a state run by all Democrats is doing, I guess you can see the thinking error that exists in that one. Only 7% of Republicans had a positive impression of Tina Kotek. And actually, only 28% of non-affiliated, it's the largest voting bloc, or those belonging to a third party, said that they had a positive impression of her. So, Democrats, less than half, 48%, said they had a positive impression. But that's pretty low for anybody running for re-election. So, I think that she's going to continue running against President Trump and claiming that whoever her opponent is just a tool of President Trump. But actually, the real tool here is the tool who's been screwing with Oregon for her entire political career and has given us what we now have. I think that you're going to see more of a focus by the Republican candidate on what's going on in Oregon, as we've seen in the primary so far. It is entirely possible that this will turn into a different kind of race as time goes on and as the issues shape what's happening. But I think there's some long-term dissatisfaction that has taken root. And I don't think Tina Kotek is going to be able to improve herself. So she's going to have to go super duper negative, attacking the Republican and messaging about President Trump relative to that, to whoever that nominee is, because she's not going to be able to get people to feel good and warm and fuzzy about Tina Kotek. The numbers are just too upside down at this point. There's nothing to really like, even for Democrats, a majority of whom don't have a positive impression of her. So I think that many people are still going to make up their minds late in the process, as it often happens. And so it'll come down to message as well. Uh, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, everything, even our, Lori, thanks for watching. Uh, yeah, even her spokesperson made the response all about Trump, not about Tina Kotek's performance in office, the education, homelessness, housing, um, and economic growth, attracting and retaining employers, businesses in this state. Um, the transportation system, which she says needs more money, while she spends $28 million a year in the transportation department on DEI, so that people that wave you through construction zones use the proper pronouns always. Uh, that's what they are going to probably pretend no one notices. Well, in other news, there was a text that went out on Friday that made some outrageous and fraudulent claims against Representative Ed Deal, one of the candidates on the Republican nomination. And they were made anonymously. So, in other words, no one stated who was the one who issued this text message. But text messages do cost money, and when you spend money advocating for or against a candidate, um, under Oregon law, as I understand it, there has to be a paid for by, and that can be paid for by anybody. It doesn't have to be that it was one of the other candidates. Jason Williams brought it out here in his commentary. Uh, the phone number it came from had no dial tone when it was called, and the ad that was done tried to claim the opposite of Ed Deal's record. A record that people know well, but obviously it was a kind of a scurrilous and fraudulent negative attack on him, claiming that he was voting for tax increases instead of being one of the top leaders in cutting taxes. And there is a question like, who did it? Who's responsible for it? Because that person could face some legal consequences, whoever did do this. And right now, no one's saying it's one of the other campaigns, but I did hear after this, I received the message that it went to so many people that amount of money is not a small amount of money that it would take to reach that many people with that fraudulent message. So, anyway, if you happen to know anything about it or can get information about who did it from anyone, I think that'd actually be pretty useful, because they should experience some consequences for violating the campaign finance laws we're all required to follow. You cannot go and spend unlimited amounts of money without reporting it or stating who it was. And in a race like this, where it's getting close, and I saw a response text that did come from the Deal campaign that claimed that there would be consequences for this, that they were fraudulent claims made in it. But it also said at the bottom of that text that as of now, Ed Deal is leading in the polling for Republicans, and voting is happening as we speak. It has been going on here for several days. Most everybody will have received a ballot in the mail by this last weekend. So, the solution, of course, is if you have criticism, stand by it and back it up. And I think this is true for anybody who's running for office. They should all stand united, not only against this type of campaigning, but also against Tina Kotek, who actually wants to figure out how to raise even more taxes, even though her gas tax is on the ballot, and you can send that into the dumper by voting no on that Measure 120. I will see. I will. And there's another story which I'm confused by, but there's a guy that ran the Kotek recall campaign. His name's Bill Minix, and apparently he's been making some claims that were labeled by the Deal campaign and as being false. That the person who Mr. Minix, who was issuing these claims, that he's a liar and that they're false, and he claims he's going to uh, uh, he's issued a cease and desist demand to Ed Deal for calling Minix's claims fraudulent and false. And Minix claims that they're all backed up on the public record. You know what? If Minix is saying that he has free speech that says that he can say anything he wants, and that may be true, but other people have free speech who can criticize that point of view. That's how it works. So I'm not really sure what he is claiming. He has a constitutional right to do that others don't, and therefore must face some consequences. I'll post this for you. I'm a little lost as to what the basis for this is. But anyway, have a look at that. I think we're going to have a very strong Republican nominee emerge here, and then it will be necessary to unite behind them because it really is going to take a combination of all of our efforts. And frankly, we need to win more than and be competitive in more than just the governor's race. There are some other races that I want to bring to your attention here too that I think are extremely important. Let me see if I can bring this one to you because it's kind of interesting. The 4th Congressional District candidate, Monique Despain, did a video. She visited the location of a RV dealer, a local business owner, who, because of people getting into his property and removing special lines that are attached to power these RVs and for them to be able to function, to get $200 worth of copper out of these wires. The theft and vandalism that was done, which is very common for drug addicts to do, because then they get the copper, they sell it, and they get cash right away. This happens all over the state, all over the country. But to get $200 worth of copper, they did $100,000 in damage that were borne by this specific business owner, and it is quite something, because when you listen to this video, it's an interview that retired Colonel Despain did with the business owner. It's pretty clear that there are real consequences to what we've allowed to happen with crime, without consequences for the people committing those crimes, who are doing it to feed an addiction and then live outside, laying waste to the community in the area, making it unlivable, making businesses suffer tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages, and be unable to serve their customers adequately. Please have a look at it, because it's actually a pretty excellent video, and I think that candidates who have strong messages and are speaking out are going to be able to deliver the results here in 2026. No one's going, and no one should say that this is somehow easy when you have a really bad or even weakened opponent in the state of Oregon, because if they have a D after their name, they're still going to be tough to beat. But this is a great example of how you speak out and drive a message that people care about, and then you look for a way to use the bully pulpit, not only of running for office, but of winning and being in office, and then the policies that you can enact at all levels of government including how we're funding a lot of this stuff, because sometimes a policy at the state level, which is bad, only is sustained because it gets money from the federal government to do it. And so have a look at this. This is a good one. So I'm just going to kind of go through some additional stories. There's a really good article by Naomi Inman uh, in the Oregon Catalyst. It's testimony by John Charles, who is with the Cascade Policy Institute. He is the president, and it's testimony that he did to the Metro Council in response to their transportation demand management strategy and the 82nd Avenue Transit Project. They want to install a bunch of mass transit out there. It's pretty squirrely area out there on 82nd. It's hard to imagine that anybody would start riding on mass transit on 82nd Avenue uh, when it's just not a place that you want to be exposed to the type of population that is living on those streets right now. And often it's a crime-ridden area. So, but they're going to move ahead with their policies. But this is something that John Charles actually offered an alternative view and calling out Metro's war on cars. Cars are what people have chosen as their preferred form of transit. And yet Metro acts like they're going to force all the people to do something different and spend enormous sums of money doing it. And yet they have never persuaded people to reduce the amount of time that they drive in their cars. They call it vehicle miles traveled. And those vehicle miles goals have never been met in 30 years. They've extended the timeline to achieve their goals to 45 years. And they also are moving the bars to make it look like it's easier for them to achieve that goal, so they can continue to justify spending enormous sums of money that punish people for doing the thing they want to do. You know, this is a free country, and free markets should ultimately fulfill what people want to do. And local governments that think they're going to go order people around. And by the way, I guarantee you the people in these local governments, most of them are driving cars around. They're not taking mass transit. They're not riding their bicycles. There's a few exceptions, but this is what they do. And they can't seem to face up to the evidence right in their face that what they're doing is a waste of money, it's anti-freedom, and it's failing. It's certainly not changing the world's temperature, which is what they say they were doing it for. Anyway, a little bit of background on that MAC bomber, the Multnomah Athletic Club bomber. Apparently, the guy was a liberal union organizer, and that is now started to come out because they soft pedaled whether or not he was a terrorist, and we talked about that last week. But he tried to unionize his workplace and failed at the Mac Club. He was a former employee, and he was a little subversive, quote unquote, when he colored some chickens pink and released them downtown at night as a stunt. Then, for whatever reason, his life descended into a serious mental health decline. He began threatening violence of all kinds against different people in his life. And there's this long rap sheet you can read in this article. And you worry that this is the type of person out there who is going to commit acts of violence because they've been egged on by Democrats who say that this is just peaceful protesting. And yet they're acts of violence. The guy loaded his car with explosives and tried to do damage to the building and kill somebody. The tolerance for this is bad enough, but the aiding and abetting of it that we saw from Congresswoman Val Hoyle in the 4th District, when those individuals, many of whom were said to be associated with Antifa, went and busted out windows in the federal building down there. And she's like, well, it's just a window. There's just a window there. You can't paint the whole group bad because of a few bad apples. And she goes on to urge them to resist and to fight back. And apparently that's being read by people like this Mac bomber as, go do violence. It's fine. Um, After all, you're fighting a Hitler-like fascist, and they're minions. That's what they're saying. So I see what you're saying there, Marjorie. The Max is mostly empty. It's true, and that's because it's just a squirrely place to be hanging out, especially in the evening. With the it's and a lot of the people who write it don't pay anything, especially the ones that are heavily sedated by fentanyl. Here's another pretty good story. Now, I think that the Democrats are starting to become almost unhinged about AI data centers. Now, we don't have to love AI data centers, but it's also, we don't have to love warehouses. We don't have to love factories, and we don't have to love any of that stuff. But a lot of it's necessary, especially given the stuff we say we want, right? We need cracking plants to produce gasoline and diesel fuel, right? Well, you know, they if they decide to go to war with a certain type of business, Democrats will demonize that business and then pursue it almost like it is a uh, no, the Hitlerite fascist wasn't in the Mac. No, don't believe so, but it's a good question. No, he wasn't. Um, nor any that I know of was in there. This guy was mentally ill, actually. Um, but back to the AI center, they're starting to focus on AI data centers as being evil, and it's manifesting itself in some policies. They are there were originally some tax breaks to encourage data centers as a business of the future, and yet there's now a deadline, and there's going to be, I don't know, a 12-month moratorium on them out in Hillsborough is one of the places where this is taking hold. Well, but the rhetoric is getting so crazy, and I've been at some community meetings where Democrats literally have said that data centers are evil. And yet they actually all use the AI tools, the Chat GPT and so on, for the things they're doing every day. So apparently they like to use it, but they consider the supplier of energy and water for these facilities as being, or the use of the energy and water by these facilities as being evil. And so now Oregon is starting to face the consequences of its policies. The policies they had, frankly, were ridiculous on what they did to our energy infrastructure, taking away reliable um, natural gas powered turbine energy, coal, taking that away, continuing the ban on nuclear energy, which is the cleanest in terms of CO2. It doesn't have any. And so Democrats have been eliminating these reliable sources, banning them, and then replacing it with unreliable solar and wind, among others. And they've been doing it in such a way that it can only pencil out economically as long as the government keeps writing big fat subsidy checks to it. So it's a completely unsustainable system. But now we're at a stage where our system just can't provide the electricity for what it has. And then, yes, these new businesses that actually require more energy are going to come in and impact that. But that situation was created before they showed up. The inability of our energy infrastructure to sustainably power uh, and provide energy for our everyday lives here in Oregon was already being jeopardized by the policies, the so-called clean or green policies that were being implemented by, among others, Governor, or at one time Speaker, Tina Kotek. So all this stuff is coming to roost, and they are blame shifting over to data centers, who are simply places that allow for the storage and use and application of data. That's it. Everybody said at one point here in Oregon, "Oh, we sure like to have more businesses like that and less of these evil smokestack industries." And now they found a way to take one of the cutting edge industries that's rapidly expanding nationally and around the world and demonize that. This is something, and this is something that I think we should keep an eye on. And the reason why is because the people that like the Mac bomber that we just talked about are hearing this information and they're kind of becoming unhinged. Um, they There was a member of Congress who some assailant fired 12 shots at the home of Representative Ron Gibson in Indianapolis, leaving a no data centers note behind, marking an alarming escalation in the grassroots opposition to AI infrastructure. And right now, half of the data centers scheduled for 2026 are facing delays due to political opposition and power constraints. Now, that is a massive section of our economy. Now, this is $64 billion in projects. And the companies that are building these data centers that need this energy are stepping up and finding ways to start generating more electricity and not put it onto the grids that we already have. But Democrats are blocking those projects too. Why? Because many of them aren't using the approved forms of energy that Democrats like solar and wind. And they're not going to, because neither solar nor wind is ever going to power any significant portion of our electrical grid. Hydro energy is, but Democrats are trying to take dams away so that they can't generate any of that either, because apparently they don't think water and gravity is renewable or clean. So we're definitely entering a new stage of Democrat irrational, anti-capitalist, anti-business, anti-economic philosophy that is now going to manifest itself in the form of crazies firing guns at legislators to modify policy. In my view, that's terrorism. That is terrorism. Use violence to try and get the policy you want in a country where you could just vote and use your voice. That's terrorism. And so I hope that everyone takes that very seriously. I understand that they might need to regulate these businesses, but they also have to understand that there is a demand for what AI does. And if that demand exists and it can be transformative for our economy to be competitive in the future, then people who are describing it as evil really sound pretty backwards. And I understand the concern that you have about the family farms in Hillsborough and Aloha. A lot of that's been caused, though, by the fact that they use this urban growth boundary, and then when they move the urban growth boundary, they swallow up all that farmland permanently. They forbid what they call low density housing, which is actually kind of more what people want, which is that you leave some farmland, you have some areas where there's some housing, and then there's some more farmland, some wild lands and forest, and then some more housing. Democrats want to scrunch it all into a small area and force you to all use mass transit, like we described earlier. It's not what people want, and the result is also not what people want. So, anyway, speaking of what people want and don't want, it looks like the money that was supposed to go to clean energy, including the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund, is now being redirected to fund the Moda Center changes so that they can keep the Blazers in town. Now, I like the Blazers. I want them to stay. But if you tell the voters that they have to pay a bunch of taxes in order to produce more clean energy, and then you take that and you use that to renovate a building, excuse me, but that's pretty deceptive, and that's going to fundamentally undermine people's confidence in the electoral system and in what's being done with their tax dollars. And that's what you're seeing right now. Um, they are redirecting funds that were labeled for other purposes, both at the state and local level, and putting it into renovating an aging arena in a state that doesn't have enough of an economic base now left to fund these things outright. So they're literally stealing money from other purposes and putting it into this. Look, I want the Blazers to stay. I'm a fan. This doesn't seem like this is going to work, especially since they're nowhere near a done deal, and yet they've already committed the state to redirecting these funds. They don't have a deal. The funding should have been contingent on a deal, and then they would have had a lot more leverage. And I know people who voted against that redirect of those funds. These are the same people right now that are doing this, that are telling you that you have to pay more gas taxes, despite the fact that they don't seem to be able to get roads paved and snow plowed and potholes fixed. So go figure. Hey, the last story here is a great commentary in the New York Post editorial board. It said, "Feds, please stop New York's unequal protection of illegal immigrant criminals." Um, and it's pretty interesting because Harmeet Dillon, who is the U.S. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, is going after these guys for essentially discriminating against regular citizens in favor of non-citizens who are here illegally and have committed crimes. The wokies that think that the criminals are victims to begin with put the criminals who are victims who are illegal immigrants in a even more exalted category. And you got to read this article because they start talking about the sheer madness of what's going on in New York City right now. And I think some people, even in deep blue New York City, are starting to wake up to it. And we know those policies are pretty much the same policies we have here in Oregon. There's an opportunity here in 2026. And it's not only for policy change, it's for a sea change, a new direction for the state and for the people representing it in Congress. Let's make that happen. Anyway, I thank you for taking the time to listen tonight, and I appreciate what all of you do that follow the show. Please share it with everyone you can and let them know what's been going on. There's a lot going on every week. This is just one weekend of headlines that I shared with you. And there's so much we have to pay attention to. Remember to get your ballot in by May 19th at 8 p.m. I recommend dropping it off at a ballot drop site box at this point, even though you can mail it and they say that it's postmarked, it'll get there. But I just prefer to deliver it to a ballot drop box. And then let's see what direction, what course we can set here post May 19th. Thank you to all of you, and I really appreciate. Where do I send fresh chocolate chip cookies to? I don't know, but I know that they they got to be a little suspicious of people bringing cookies to them, probably, especially in like Eugene or Portland. But at the same time, let's see what we can do to just spread the good word of how hard these people work and how much risk they take on our behalf. And then maybe we can get them some fresh chocolate chip cookies at some point too. Anyway, thanks so much, and you guys have a great night, and we'll see